Sean, Chris, look who we
Yes.
have on the show today. Boyd and Beth Morrison and the Lawless
Oh,
Land.
this is going to be fun.
Yeah,
This is the first.
I know.
We've had
Really?
siblings separately, but never together. So
That's
this
right.
is
Really?
Oof.
yeah.
Well, let's see how this goes. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you had Lee and Andrew.
No. Oh, yeah. You know what?
Yeah, we did.
Right. I was thinking of Lee Goldberg and Todd Goldberg. You're right. We have not had a male and female set of siblings on the show, so it's still historical.
Yeah, we don't even know any other brother sister thriller writer.
We know sister, and we know brother.
Right.
Yeah, brother sister. Nope.
Yeah,
Well-
blazing a trail.
Well, good thing somebody's here to keep Boyd honest. Well, with
She
that,
does.
so let's talk about this new book of yours, Lawless Land. It's your first novel collaboration. And so with that in mind, can the two of you collaborate on a quick overview of what our readers can expect in this new novel of yours?
Yeah, we've been practicing speaking every other word. So that's how we're going to do this.
All right.
Nobody's going to see this episode anyway, so don't
No.
worry.
Just a lot of editing going to happen.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. What was the question? No.
Yeah. See.
yeah.
Yeah. Did we? Well, I'll tell the story of how I got the idea of writing with Beth, which was like many things in my life came from my wife. I was wrapping up working on the Oregon File series with Clive and looking at doing something else. And I was thinking of different genres and possibilities. And one thing I was thinking of was historical thrillers, because I love books about World War II and I know a lot about that era, but I didn't know if that was the right way to go. And I was talking to my wife about it, and she said, well, if you want to write historical fiction, well, you've got a built-in co-author. And I said,
No
"Who's
joke."
that?"
Oh my God. We're being honest
And
on that.
she
We're
goes,
being honest today. Okay.
Your sister, who is a world expert on the Middle Ages. And I went, oh yeah. I guess
Her.
she's an author herself. She's written a bunch of nonfiction books about her exhibits at the Getty, and she has a PhD in art history and is an expert medievalist.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's actually a good idea.
Yeah.
And because I would never have written a book in this era without her, because I don't know, I knew a little based on what she's educated me on, but not to the depth I would need to write this story. So I called Beth. And what was it like getting that call, Beth?
Awesome.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Nice.
because I had always worked with Boyd a bit on his books, like when he wanted to talk through something or whatever. I have a good eye for detail and scene continuity and what is logistically possible and stuff. And so he called me and he said, hey, would you like to write a book with me about the Middle Ages? And I was like, we're done. That's all you need to say. I'm sold.
I'll write it. You just promote it.
So it took a nanosecond or two. And then we went from there, and, we decided we wanted to use a lot of, my knowledge and medieval tropes. And so we were like, okay, it's going to be about a knight-errant, and there's going to be a damsel in distress. And my specialty is medieval illuminated manuscript. So I'm like, a medieval illuminated manuscript has to be at the heart of the book. And so we kind of took those basic building blocks and wrote a really, I think, fascinating and really kind of cool plot around it, with twists and turns and secret passages and jousts and everything you'd expect from the Middle Ages.
Which was why I was so stinking excited when I first saw
that
you guys were putting this together, because I love the Middle Age period. So I took one class in college, which was warfare in the Middle Ages. And let me tell you, that was the hardest class outside of advanced, organic chemistry, I think, because man, was she detailed about this sort of stuff. So what I kind of remember was, and we're talking about the 1350 period. I mean, you guys' book starts out 1351. We're just at the tail end of the pestilence. And so what I can remember is the average size male was somewhere in the 5'2" to 5'6" range, right? And so given how they pretty much had two types of metal to work with, heavy and heavier, how were guys that size wearing 100+ pounds? Was their combat, true hand-to-hand combat, was it a lot slower and a little more plod-like than what we typically see in like the movies?
Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because Boyd and I recently took jousting lessons ourselves.
Yeah.
And we put on medieval armor, and we held the shields, and we had the great helms on, and we had the lances. And I have to admit, it was a bit much for me. I think it was a little bit easier for Boyd physically, but I kind of think of it as, think of like 100 Tom Cruises running around, right? Like, he does everything himself. He's an incredible sort of stunt guy, and he wears heavy stuff all the time and does that. So just imagine all the medieval knights being like Tom Cruises.
I like this fact because I would be a giant if I was transported back to that time. 5'9".
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I probably would have been
I'm the
burned
king
at the
now.
stake. I'm 5'8" and I have red hair. I was like, out of there.
Oh my
man.
God, it was a Viking woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm 6'5", so I'd be like Goliath, I think.
Oh yeah, you would be a legend in that time period.
Yeah, for sure.
The mountain that rides.
Yeah, you're the mountain. Yeah, for sure.
Well, Boyd, you want to add any of that jousting story?
Yeah, well, it was definitely a challenge, and I think I've done, in the research I've done, I don't think they were quite that short. I think they were definitely shorter than the average person now, but there were still big people, and I think Beth could talk about that in terms of the historical record. But there's actually a video, if you can find it on YouTube, that shows 3 different guys doing an obstacle course. One of them is wearing full fire gear, like a firefighter. One is wearing full combat gear that a soldier would have, and one was wearing medieval armor. And they did the entire obstacle course racing each other. And I think the guy in medieval armor came in first or second.
Oh my gosh.
Really?
And so it shows that, you know, it's definitely heavy, but, you know, current soldiers wear a lot of heavy stuff as well.
Oh, okay.
That's true.
So I think, you know, it's just they're athletes, and they train every day, and they do this all the time. They ride horses every day. It's like us driving a car. We don't even think about it. They just get on a horse and they know how to do it because they've done it all their lives.
Right.
And for us, when we were doing it, I was having to think about I think about riding the horse and not falling off and holding the lance and looking through a slit about this big.
Right.
When we had the great helms on, it was intense, but you know, I could see if I did that every day for 20 years, I'd probably be a lot better at it.
Yeah, good point.
I did see real quick. There was a video you guys posted on social media, and I think it was Beth, and she was able to, with the joust in the ring, and hit it perfectly. But I didn't see a video of you, Boyd, doing it.
Huh.
Yeah, somehow they got corrupted, and we couldn't
file
find
lost.
Okay.
Because I was like dead on with those.
Yeah.
Somebody exposed the film in the dark room. Somebody exposed the film.
For some reason, the lance was hard to get into the ring when you're bouncing up and down on a horse. I don't understand.
Crazy.
I think I'm all about precision, and Boyd was the one about the strength. So
just brute force,
the archery and the spear throwing and the jousting. So, you know, you're right. The one I put online was the one of me ring spearing, because that was the only one that I looked like knew what I was doing.
It was awesome. That was awesome.
Loved it.
Well, one of my favorite personal favorite novels, and even the film, was Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, and that shares some of the locales in the medieval setting, but the Lawless Land is an entirely different kind of tale. Yeah. And you told us, you sort of touched on this earlier, but can you take us through that first conversation, that first meeting, and how this particular plot came to life in your conversations together?
Well, I think, Beth has edited all of my novels. She knows my style. She likes the same kinds of stories I like. I think in storytelling, we both get bored easily. And so we knew we wanted to make this a fast-paced, as action-packed and fast-paced as any of my contemporary novels, but just in a different setting. And that's not something that we've seen a lot of, because we had read a lot of historical fiction, but the two kinds of historical thrillers that mainly are out there are either a mystery, like Name of the Rose, that takes place in one place where a monk is trying to solve a murder or something. Yeah. And then the other kind is usually a different view of a known historical event. So the Battle of Hastings told through the eyes of a squire, that kind of thing. And our story, we really wanted to do something that we haven't seen in a long time, which goes back to the storytelling tropes of Robin Hood or the Three Musketeers, where it's just an adventure with new characters in a setting that we know a little about, but we could put our own spin on.
And I think actually our book in a way has a lot more of a feel of actually medieval literature, because it was the Middle Ages when the whole genre of sort of adventure tales and romances was born. And so if you go back, one of the books, one of the manuscripts in our collection that I've written a whole nonfiction book about is called The Romance of Julien de Trazegnies, who was a knight in the 15th century. And during the course of his story, like he battles pirates and he goes off and becomes, a squire to the Sultan. And then he turns out he has twin sons and he mistakenly gets married to somebody else. And so he doesn't know he's a bigamist. And actually a lot more like weird and kind of incredible stuff happens to him than even Gerard Fox in our book. Wow. But it really does harken back to that sort of the origins. And one of the things Boyd and I often talk about is we're both huge fans of Lee Child. And, his main character was originally based on a knight-errant. That's the whole sort of thing about he goes around bringing justice to the people with his might. And that's, that is a medieval trope. That is something you find in medieval novels. So we're just kind of going back to the source, as it were.
Yeah, and the knight-errant kind of story structure is something that I really like. The Man with No Name with Clint Eastwood. Right. They're based on a knight-errant where he goes around, travels, and cleans up the town and then leaves. The Mandalorian is a knight-errant.
Yeah, that's right.
He goes around the galaxy solving people's problems and then he leaves. And so what we just wanted to do was, we hadn't seen a story of an actual knight-errant in the Middle Ages. And so we just went back to the origin of all these stories and wanted to do that kind of story since Beth has the expertise and that's my storytelling style.
You were talking about Lee Child, and he gave you guys a fantastic blurb on the front cover. For people who haven't seen it yet, I'll read it. It says, fantastic. Gerard Fox could be Jack Reacher's ancestor 700 years ago. Highly recommended. And it's like spot on. I love that. After reading it, I was like, yep, spot on.
Yeah. But and because Beth and I both wanted to feature a couple, so that's one thing that's different about our story versus, although every book Reacher pairs up with a hot sheriff or a beautiful FBI agent or something like that. That's kind of what we did in this story, is that the damsel in distress ends up doing a lot of the saving of Gerard Fox. So Isabel is she's not as combat oriented, but she solves a lot of their problems, maybe even more than Gerard Fox does at some point. So we both brought that to the story.
I love that he makes those comments so many times to her that he's like, you're like no woman I've ever met before. Just her analytical thinking, her shrewdness, her, like being able to just size people up immediately, and very clever. She was awesome. So the Lawless Land, it takes readers from England across the channel to France and then Italy. And anyone who follows you on social media would have seen some of the photos you posted on your travels to these locations, including my favorite is the two of you sleeping on the train. I don't know.
Yes, that's when we do our best thinking. That's how we do
We
plotting.
weren't sleeping.
Yes.
We were concentrating.
Right.
Concentrating.
We were
Yes.
thinking deeply.
but so, with as good as the story reads, do you think you could have written it without visiting those places?
It wouldn't have been the same story. And we got a lot of the ideas that we had for the story from actually visiting the places that we visited. And we basically followed the path that our characters take in the story. We actually went in the same order as well.
Okay.
And so luckily Beth knows a lot of people. Like, she knows the Dean of Canterbury Cathedral. So we had lunch with him, and then he took us on a tour of the cathedral.
That's awesome.
Small flex. Yeah.
So, and Beth, Beth, if you ever want to go on a tour of a museum or church or anything, going with Beth is 100 times better than going on your own, because she knows so much interesting information about it.
Opening all those doors, huh, Beth?
We'll put a link to goingwithbeth.com at the end. So her travel company.
I often hire Boyd to do my PR. It works out really well.
Know your strengths, right? So, and we talked a little bit about tropes, but there's also a lot of truth to it too, that kind of religion and chivalry and honor are kind of deeply infused in the culture, particularly, I think, probably, and I'm just guessing, probably in the wealthier, sections of society. But with a single command from a king militarily, an incursion could, how do you pronounce it? Chevauché?
Chevauché.
Chevauché.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that everything in front of you gets wiped out.
Yeah, crazy.
Men, children are killed, women are assaulted, and then probably not even spared the sword themselves. Nothing left alive, everything taken. So you go from one extreme all the way to the other end. What was the justification process back there, particularly from the eyes of the church in something like this?
Yeah, well, sadly, I don't think it's that much different from what we see today in modern warfare. I mean, I know that we all like to think, you use expressions like, well, that's so medieval. But when you think of most of the atrocities that you just described, it's not like they're absent from things like, you see the wars in Africa, or you see even the war right now in Ukraine. It's not like, that idea of chivalry sort of conquering all happens on an individual level as much as we would like it to happen. So I think that what we're really trying to tap into, as Boyd said, is like, our story is set in the Middle Ages, but there are so many aspects of it that I think are resonant today.
So true.
And one of them, of course, is the fact that it's set in this post-plague world. And, that's exactly where we all are right now. Now, that wasn't intentional, because we—
Crazy coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we started this book in 2018, so we, had no idea. But I think those are the kinds of things that people will pick up on.
History repeating itself.
Unfortunately.
Wow.
Well, speaking of history repeating itself and things that keep occurring, there's a character in the book who uses his position vis-a-vis the church to enrich himself greatly at the expense of others. Something that we might call a shakedown in today's world. I know there has been a considerable amount of grift in the history of the church, but as I read that, I wondered, is that character based on a specific historical figure?
No, we didn't. I mean, there are certainly historical figures that we know of who, were kind of guilty of almost everything he actually did, but more of a composite bad guy than based on a particular person. And again, I think that you look at, major world religions today, and, despite the fact that there's a lot of good, obviously, that's done with religion, you know, the number of scandals continues, you know, so again, not that completely different from what we see in our own book.
Yeah, we constantly see stories in the news about some kind of religious figure doing something very similar to what we have our character in the book doing, and you know, it's so unfortunate that everything in our book could happen today just with the new technology that we have, but
Right.
human nature doesn't change.
Yeah, that's exactly the story. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, and it's keeping with that character. I don't want to give any spoilers, but that he was able to rise to that level of power and wealth only through the church. It wasn't happening any other way. And so you could have a king, you can have the wealthy. I guess there was a merchant class, but I guess it wasn't as prevalent as, you know, like middle classes today. But the only way he gets there is through the church, and he recognized that right away and went into it. And I wonder if just, you know, the people like him gravitated towards that because that was their only avenue, their only ladder to go up, and that's why the church, you know, so many horrible things happen in the name of God or in the church because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was that, but also, you know, you had to be born into the nobility, and all different kinds of people are born into the nobility. And unfortunately, they use their power in, you know, ways that were not appropriate either. So, you know, again, everything you see in our society, it's like you see plenty of stories about rich people gone bad.
Yeah.
And plenty of people in contemporary politics who are using their power in inappropriate ways.
What?
So, you know.
No.
Beth, is it fair to say that some use the church kind of as a, I don't want to say shortcut to nobility because they were separate from nobility, but they kind of had a similar status in society?
They did have a similar status. I would say that, you know, in our book, the figure that we're talking about, he actually was born into the minor nobility. So even though, you know, he attained a much higher level of power than if he had just, you know, sort of married and stayed in his exact genre, we're still talking about the cream of society at the top.
Right.
It wasn't like you could be, I mean, there were occasions when you were like born a peasant, you could make it all the way to cardinal or something, but that's not the normal story.
That makes sense.
Well, Boyd, you have a ton of experience co-writing novels. In fact, you wrote several with the late great Clive Cussler. So like you get it, you know how it works. And Beth, you co-edited an award-winning book, Book of Beasts, and several other ones. But you've never written fiction before, though, right? It was always nonfiction. So even though you had your brother with all his vast professional commercial writing experience to look to for advice as you guys were writing this, did you have any misgivings about the task that you and he were about to undertake?
I think most of my misgivings were the fact that I never thought it would actually get published.
All that work?
Us three guys had the same feeling.
Yeah.
I think I thought of it as kind of a lark, as a fun project to do with Boyd. And I tried to keep in mind that I actually do have a job and I have, you know, a paycheck that comes every other week, and that this is really his career in a way that it isn't mine. So I tried to be mindful of his time and really be diligent about working with him. But, you know, it's like, thinking about it now, the book is out in less than a month. And, you know, Boyd and I did a little video online about opening the crates, and we got the books out for the first time, and I saw it, and we did the video, and it was super cute. And then we like put down the Zoom, and Boyd was like, "You never thought this was going to happen."
It was that obvious, huh, Boyd? It was that obvious?
Oh, yeah. I think until we see it in a store, she's not going to believe this is really happening. I mean,
like
even though
wife.
she's written 7 or 8 books on her own, this is, I guess, a different animal for her. And, you know, I always had faith in the story because I think it's a fun story that we don't really, there's nothing else like it out there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
The way I put it was to our to our publicist is that if you want what we're doing, we're the only ones doing it. So
That's true.
you know, it's who knows, but we think it's a fun new kind of story that is different from anything else out there. And so, you know, I had a great time working with Beth on it. And the way we work is we plot the book together. We talk to each other every day, more than once a day, a lot of times, and we plot it. And if I get stuck, you know, that's a great thing about having a co-author like Beth is it's hard to have writer's block, because if I get stuck, I just call her up and say, hey, I can't figure out what to do in this. And we talk it through, and then I go, okay. And then I go and write it. I write the book and send Beth chapters as we go. And she reads it and edits it, and then also fixes all my anachronisms. So if I go, Isabel is wearing a dress, I don't know what that is.
That's not a dress.
Yeah, it's a dress, whatever. Right?
He was wearing a green surcoat over a girdle. Okay. You know what you're talking about. I don't.
Fine, whatever.
Yeah.
I want to send my work to Beth now.
Yeah. And the great thing is Beth is an expert in the era, but there are some things that she didn't know. But if that's the case, she knows the person who will know.
Right.
Awesome.
So
Exactly.
she'll go, oh, I know the director of the British Museum. I'll just email him.
Yeah.
You know, okay.
Name
No
drop.
big deal.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So other than the fact that your reaction working together, what about your family? How excited? What's the excitement level of your family of seeing this?
Yeah.
Two of you guys together.
They're really
They're
excited.
thrilled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my wife has been a huge part of this. She went on the research trip that we did to Europe, and she's also one of my first editors. So she's intimately involved in it, and our siblings are excited about it. And
my boyfriend read it as soon as we finished it and offered his commentary as well. And he's really made a lot of it possible for me because, you know, I already have a full-time job.
Yeah.
So
Right.
this is sort of like on top of it. And then I'm, you know, also writing scholarly works myself that are also outside of my job. And he's just been very good about like, okay, here's another cup of tea, or wow, you've been on the phone with Boyd for 3 hours. That's something.
Well, I was actually more curious about the siblings. I have 5 siblings myself, and I would get 5 different reactions from the 5. So I was just curious.
we have had a number of people outside of our family go, you can write with your sister?
You're not killing each other?
Brother? How is that going? I mean, they're very dubious, like thinking that we're about to kill each other, but we work great together. We've had plenty of trips other than our research trips together. Right. And, you know, we've been best friends all of our lives. So it's been a very smooth process.
Oh, good.
And I think for our older siblings, our older brother is an engineer, which is what Boyd is trained in as well. But I remember way back when I got the job at the Getty, he was like, oh my God, you got a job as an art historian. I thought I was going to have to support you for the rest of my life.
Oh my gosh.
So I think that like this is just an outgrowth of all of that. And I think our siblings aren't really surprised that we're writing a book together at all.
That's good.
And they're incredibly supportive, and they're just like so excited.
Are all the Morrisons PhDs?
We have a lot of very educated people.
You could just say yes.
Or you could look at the other way and say, you know, there's a lot of people just didn't know what they wanted to be in life and just stayed in school until I figured it out. So.
Although I don't use my PhD anymore.
Yeah, I know.
I gave that up.
I'm not doing surgery anymore, and here I am doing a podcast. So yeah.
Yeah. We just didn't know what we wanted to do when we grew up.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and Boyd's wife is an actual doctor, like a real doctor.
Not like
and
our
so
fake
when we travel together, we always joke because, you know, every once in a while someone will like get on the plane and have, you know, some kind of medical problem. And they're like, is there a doctor in the house? And, you know, Boyd will turn to Randy and be like, do you want to get this one? Or should I?
Yeah,
It's happened 5 times. My wife has taken care of people 5 times on when we've been traveling. I didn't realize how many times people got called on planes for
crazy.
until
I've never been called on a plane.
Doctor.
I've never been called on a plane, not once.
Haven't?
And I travel constantly. Yeah, not once.
Wow.
So
no, it's happened 5 times. Maybe it's bad luck on our
That's crazy.
Probably, yeah. You cannot really talk about middle-aged Europe in the 1300s without confronting the plague. I mean, just front and center. I mean, when a disease wipes out pretty much a quarter of the population or more. But my curiosity is more is, how did the illness affect the numbers of the elite and the wealthy versus the poorer classes? Is there any information on how it affected the two? Because, everything was available to the upper class when very little was available, from medical care to diet to everything else. How did that disease affect those two? Because it kind of is the ending of that at the start of your book.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly affected the nobility quite heavily. I don't know that we have any hard numbers on the distinctions between the nobility and the yeomanry or the peasantry, but I would imagine in general, the nobility ended up doing slightly better, but not maybe for the reasons that everybody would think of immediately. I think the main reason that the nobility would have done better was because about the spaces they lived in. So first of all, there weren't 10 people living in a single room.
Right.
So in terms of infecting other people, you're not, it's just like today, right? That's where quarantine comes from. It's staying away from people.
Base work.
But the other thing is the nobility lived in homes that had walls that were not nearly as permeable as the peasantry.
Right.
So the peasantry tended to live in like wattle and daub kind of homes that had a timber frame, but the walls were fairly open to the outside. And since we know that plague was spread through rats and the fleas that go on rats, then you can imagine that they could go through those walls really readily. Now, if you're in the second floor of a stone castle, you're just not going to have as many rats sort of scurrying around the floors.
Right.
So I think there was that distinction, but there certainly were kings and queens and princesses who died of the plague that are noted in the historical record.
And we even feature that in the King of France. His first wife died of the plague. And so that played into the story a bit. But I believe the upper echelons of the church were mostly protected because they were able to retreat into their estates and they could sequester themselves from the poor people who were getting the plague. So I think in that way, the upper tiers of society were more protected.
Although I think Pope Cleo actually lost like 30% of his cardinals at one point in time too. So
really,
yeah,
it really depended on how involved with the people those particular religious figures were. And so when you do look at it, the records of parish priests dying was huge because of course they were going into all the infected homes to give people last rites if they were sort of good priests, as it were. But there were a lot who ran away, as Boyd said, and sort of went out into the country and waited for the waves to go over them. So
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just was going to say it's usually on a person by person basis, just like today.
Yeah,
I found it interesting too how they you had one scene where Gerard was trying to save his father, and he was like, there were people who were making these potions and they were preying on people's, just spending all this money and really not getting anything, or the leeches and whatnot. Just interesting
really
stuff.
Hasn't changed in 670 years.
No.
Opportunists even then, yeah.
That was like the first 6 months of this last one. Yeah.
Cures. People, I saw somebody, espousing drinking your own urine to ward off COVID. I'm like, that didn't
work. That didn't work, Boyd.
Chris still got it.
Didn't work.
I think you should try again.
Don't say that. You're a doctor.
I'll let Boyd take that one.
Boyd, I want you to answer this question first, just because of your sister's background. But then Beth, I want to hear.
And she can correct me.
Yeah, I want to hear her answer as well. But as you immerse yourself in this period, you no doubt got a richer picture of the realities of life in the 14th century than, for instance, the films we've all seen and most of the books we've read. What details did you uncover that surprised, or if you prefer, horrified you the most?
Well, one of the things I just didn't know is that most people, especially non-nobility or upper echelons of the church, didn't sleep in a bed. Just something very simple like that. They just slept on rushes on a floor. I didn't know that. That was, just a simple thing as you're writing, they got into bed. No, they didn't. They just sprinkled some rushes on the floor, and that's what they slept on. I had no idea. The other interesting thing, we do feature a duel in the book, and in our research, we found out that duels were conducted in complete silence.
I didn't know that.
You see on movies and the duels that are actually combat to the death for a judicial reason, a judicial duel or trial by combat.
Right.
There were many announcements before the duel started, and unlike in a jousting tournament where everybody's cheering their favorite knights on and it's very exciting and happy occasion, a duel to the death is a very solemn occasion for a very important purpose. And so one of the announcements that the herald made before a duel was that everybody must be completely silent under pain of death. If you spoke, if you laughed, if you did anything, you could be put to death by order of the king. And so a duel was conducted in complete silence, which made sense to me once I understood that, but I had no idea because that's not what we see in popular culture.
That's cool.
Yeah, I was fascinated by that scene.
By you, Beth, was there anything that
Yes. There was a lot of things that I did not know about daily life in the 14th century. When I sort of embarked on it, I'm like, I'm a trained medievalist. I've been doing this for 30 years. And then Boyd was like, so what would they have paid for a toll in Canterbury in 1351? I'm like, I don't know. So there was a lot of research that had to happen. But one of the most interesting things that I had to research that, of course, I'd never run into in my academic work was how did they curse in the Middle Ages? Because that was something we had to have people making exclamations and sort of calling each other names and stuff. And one of my favorite things is I'd never really thought about it, but we call them oaths, right? Like, when you're talking about cursing, another word is, and that's exactly where it originated, was from the Middle Ages, because the most common oath you would talk about in the Middle Ages was something that involved God. And it's really funny. You'd say like, by God's fingernails. And it's like, okay, I didn't know that. But that's actually what they did, was they swore an oath by some part of God's body, by God's toes or something. So I thought that was, kind of interesting. And then you were mentioning movies. One of my big pet peeves about every medieval movie, I don't know why, but they shoot it in this sort of like pseudo black and white where everything is really washed out. Yeah. So if you have that in mind, I can tell you the Middle Ages was in color too, just FYI.
Oh, and one of the things that I didn't know when we went to churches is we see churches now that they're very monochromatic, especially inside.
Right.
And apparently during the Middle Ages, they would paint the interior very colorful. They would have, what are those things called, the sculptures, Beth?
Like the tympana?
The things on the columns and like the Reynard,
the capitals.
Capitals. They would paint those in very vibrant colors. And the reason is because most people who would come into the church, this is like their daily or weekly entertainment. And so, you know, seeing these stained glass windows and the colorful paintings and stuff were kind of their entertainment for the week. And so I had no idea but since, you know, in the 600 years since then, it's all faded and hasn't been repainted.
Yeah, and it was part of like an expression of wealth too, because for people in the Middle Ages, yes, there's grass and trees and everything, but in terms of applied color, only the nobility could afford to wear outfits that were actually different colors. And the same thing when you went into the cathedral, that was the most colorful sort of man-made experience that anyone would have had in the Middle Ages. Because you have, like Boyd said, the painted columns, the painted capitals, you have stained glass windows, you have altar cloths in rich colors, you have all these, you know, illuminated manuscripts. And so it was an expression, color was kind of an expression of wealth.
Oh, this is fascinating, man.
Well, so looking back, so I'm going to start with Beth. So looking back on this experience, the writing, the traveling, was there anything you wish you would have done differently?
I wish I would have started doing social media earlier.
No, you don't.
No, you were lost your mind.
Yes.
I have not traditionally done social media, and it's been a big learning curve. And I think I put it off to the last possible
me
second.
too.
And now I'm getting into it, and I'm enjoying doing the videos and everything. But it did take me a while to get up on that. But I would say, like, I wish Boyd and I would have done this 10 years ago, but I don't think we would have brought the depth to it that we have now. And so I think it was kind of perfect timing.
Yeah. And looking back on the story, I don't think there's anything we would change about the story. There's definitely things we want to do in the next story that are different and you know, that we want to explore. But for the Lawless Land, I think it's the story we wanted to tell.
Beautiful.
So he teased though. He teased. What the second story? What?
Yes, we are. We took another research trip last fall to Italy and Greece. So, yeah, we actually, the whole point of doing these books is so that we get to do a research trip to Europe in a different place. So yes.
You're doing it right. You're doing it right.
So, where did you travel in Italy?
We went to Siena, Florence, and Venice, and then we went to the island of Rhodes in Greece.
Okay.
Oh God, that sounds beautiful.
And you know, one of the cool things about both the first story and the second story is that almost every place that we feature in the story, at least the major locations, you can still go visit 670 years later, and they're very similar to how they would have looked in 1351. And so awesome. It's very cool that when we were there planning an action scene or planning where people are in the setting, it really, you can see it now that it's not that different from when what it was back then.
So one more, just one follow-up. So is it a Gerard Fox too, or is it other characters? Okay.
No, Gerard Fox will continue following his adventures and see what he gets up to next.
You might have created a whole new genre that just pops out of this thing. So you might be the godfather of historical.
Being to see more stories like this.
Both of you guys being Reacher fans, have you thought about like putting an Easter egg, like having like, I don't know, having him drink coffee every or
I don't know if you
he doesn't wear a sundial because he always knows the time.
But we have thought about, you know, I do have a contemporary character that I haven't written a story about him named Tyler Locke for a while. But I thought if I ever do another Tyler Locke book, it might be fun for him to discover the manuscript that we have.
Crap. Yeah,
you're talking.
Yeah, so that there would be a link between them.
See, I love stuff like that.
Who knows? Gerard Fox really could be the ancestor of Reacher. He's a big guy for his era, and
that'd be neat.
you know, so.
We're going to have to live to be 200 years old to finish all these books. Well,
We should tell Lee Child that he should have in his next novel, have Jack Reacher do that, like that online genealogy thing.
Yeah,
And find out.
Ancestry.com.
That would be a riot.
Well, you guys, congratulations on surviving the main portion of our interview.
Cheers.
Take a big old swig because this is what it gets down and dirty here.
Ready for it.
This is where
Maybe not.
She
Let me have
says
another
she's
drink.
ready for this.
Yeah.
There is no possible way to be ready for this.
You have no idea the questions we're going to ask you.
Oh,
All right.
gee.
So Boyd, you see Maury trembling and he's sweating because he knows what's coming. All right, this is my first question, and I'm gonna let Beth answer this one. If you were to meet one period correct knight from Monty Python in the Search for the Holy Grail, who do you choose and why?
Can I meet the rabbit? Is that
The Killer Rabbit?
That's
Killer
it.
rabbit.
I want to meet the killer rabbit because I want to
That's just
try
one
out my
lightning
different
round.
lines, and then I'll just be like, I'll say the perfect thing because I can speak in 14th century Old French, and the rabbit will be completely like, let me go past, just like the first one, and then Boyd comes up.
Oh,
Run away! Run
But I'll have
away!
the holy hand grenade, so.
Beth,
blue.
look at
No
the
red.
bones. Look at the bones.
Look at the bones.
My favorite
All
line.
right. All right. So Beth probably knows this answer, so I'm going to ask Boyd. Where did the name Black Plague come from?
Well, one of the things we learned, that I learned, Beth knew already, was that it wasn't called the Black Plague in 1351. It
That's
was
right.
called either the Great Mortality or the Pestilence.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, because they didn't call it the Black Plague at that time. That name only came later, and I'm not sure when it did.
Okay.
Can I
do you-
tell?
Yes,
Yeah.
please. do.
Yeah.
Please.
I knew Beth would know.
So I think if I remember correctly, it was something much later, as Boyd said. I think it might have been 16th or even 17th century. And if I remember, it was originally called the Black Death in a Swedish chronicle. So I think it actually came from Sweden, but now you guys can all look it up on Wikipedia and tell me I'm wrong.
So the Black Plague was part of the visible response to the actual disease itself. And so the lymph nodes would often
Right.
swell and turn black.
Yes.
Right.
Thus, when you died, you had these large blackened splotches called the Black Death. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was, you're right. It was years and years and years later. All right. Beth
Yuck.
may or may not know this, so I'm going to throw this out to the duo here. Many people don't know that there was another natural disaster in Europe about 30 years previous to the plague outbreak, which proved to be as potent or even more potent of a killer, wiping out 30 or more % of the population on that continent at that moment. Do either of you know what actually occurred?
Form of a question, Beth. Form of a question.
I got in first.
Yes.
Famine, the Great Famine.
The Great Famine.
And
Yep.
actually, that played a role in the Black Death. I read an epidemiology report, actually. There's a lot of research happening right now in the Black Death, I think spurred partially by interest given through the COVID years.
Right.
And what's really interesting is they said that one of the reasons, because one of the questions has always been like, well, we still have bubonic plague today.
We do.
Why was it so bad in the Middle Ages? And one of the reasons they think is because the adults who suffered through the Black Plague, they were children during the Great Famine. And so they never got the kind of nutrients, and it actually affected their health lifelong, and they were much more susceptible to plague.
Interesting.
Because of the Great Famine having been only like 30 years ahead of them.
My wife just diagnosed bubonic plague about 8 or 9 years ago in Colorado. It was one of the first in like over a decade. So it's
Was it a
still-
prairie dog?
No, it was a dead squirrel.
Ah,
What?
One of the other epidemiological, I'm going to throw this out there only because I remember it from school and I don't know why, is that people were beginning to move into city centers. And so the proximity of the population with the rat infestation created a much more potent vector from the animals because people were living in tighter and tighter communities. And so
that's certainly true. And that's why we see the bad bubonic plague outbreaks in the 19th century were in San Francisco and India for those
Right.
very reasons.
Right.
Who says you can't learn anything on our show?
I know.
I remember something from
I mean-
school.
Well,
I mean, I didn't get any of it.
that stops now. No, actually,
Thank God.
My first question, I guess, there's a little bit of learning here, but then after that, it goes downhill. So, what was the primary food staple of peasants in medieval times?
Bread. The peasants didn't eat a lot of meat. It just was too expensive. So what they ate were these things called, it was pottage bread, essentially, which is a kind of bread that has legumes in it, like peas and whatnot, that actually gave them the protein.
See, now you're correct. What I heard or what I read was that barley was the staple, and then pottage was kind of like the upper crust of the peasants that have no pottage.
The upper crust president.
Frozen banquet meals.
Oh, I just picture these people chewing like barley. Okay. Well, let's use that as a launching point to this book is so successful, and there's such a demand for it that Beth and Boyd decide to open up a medieval themed restaurant, complete with reenactments and everything, but authentic reenactments, quiet during the duels. But what is the restaurant called?
It is called the Sword and Bread.
Not
That's
bad.
pathetic. Come on,
The
Brent.
sword and barley.
Sword and barley.
I like the Fox and the Unicorn.
Fox and the Unicorn. That would be a
Okay.
good one.
Yeah.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
think if we get that rich, we're just going to buy medieval times and let them do their thing.
Yeah, we're gonna be so rich we can just buy them.
Live results. Yes.
Yeah, but you got to rebrand it. Beth and Boyd's medieval time.
Yeah, Dolly Parton's, thing.
But the peasants can't eat meat, so there's no chicken.
Yeah.
Right. Well, everybody will be knighted upon entering, so they can have meat when they get in.
Be quiet during the duel, or we will kill you.
To the death. To the death.
My final question. Good news. After reading this book, it is optioned by none other than the Xena warrior princess herself for $1 million. But the catch is, she wants to call the film "The Lucy Lawless Land." Is that a deal? Is that a deal breaker for 7 figures?
We went
Can
downhill.
you tell us what money is on the table?
Yeah.
Yeah, 7 figures.
Yes, 7 figures, $1 million.
$1 million.
Bring it on.
Get on. Yeah.
Where do I
Not too
sign?
proud.
Land. I love it.
The Lucy Lawless Land.
Lucy Lawless.
All right.
That's the name of the restaurant.
Yes.
Lucy Lawless Land.
That's trademarked already.
Actually, that completely reminds me of something.
No, stop. Stop.
A complete aside on there's an SNL skit where Lucy Lawless hosts, and she does a Stevie Nicks owns a Mexican restaurant.
Oh my God.
It is one of the best skits you'll ever see. So make sure you check that out.
All right. Get your Jeopardy buzzers. Boyd,
go.
Beth.
And Boyd is actually a Jeopardy champion. I don't know if you knew
I
that.
know.
We know.
I don't
We
have
know.
that many,
We know.
you know.
We had 2 on the show.
Beth
We
was
know.
there. She was in the audience.
I was in the audience learning how to use the buzzer, so I'm ready.
All right. Ready?
Ready?
So, Mike and Sean, you guys could be the judge of who puts their thumb down the quickest.
All right.
Here's the clue.
Boyd has to put it up first.
Yeah. Come on. This
knows how to
three-part,
I won for a
panel.
reason. I cheated.
Shh, listen. I'm not Alex Trebek. This 3-part panel was common form for altarpieces in medieval art.
Beth.
Triptych.
No, she has to say, what is triptych?
Oh.
Hey, no, she gets a pass the first time. Alex
All
always
right.
couldn't break the first time.
All right. 100 points.
Yeah.
Beth. All right. This is for 200 points. Here's the clue. A 2012 poll by Britain's National Army Museum voted this man, born in 1732, as the nation's greatest military enemy. I'll read it again. A 2000. Oh, Beth.
George Washington.
Beth?
Well, Beth rang in first, and you didn't formulate a question.
For 200 points, Beth, what is the answer?
Who is Napoleon?
No.
No.
Boyd, what was your answer?
Who is George Washington?
That's right.
Right. Yes.
Oh.
Very
I mean,
good.
that
Very
is
good.
not a medieval question.
I
Can
know, I
just
know.
say?
I know. All right. So that was you both
That was
have
200 points.
that was 200 points. So Beth, you have 100. Boyd, you have 200.
Triple Jeopardy. Here we go.
This is triple Jeopardy. This is for 1,000. You win this. You get it. Here's the clue. Very serious. This podcast is 3 co-hosts and is considered a must stop for authors on book tour.
Beth.
The crew review. What is
No,
the
you didn't
review?
answer the question.
She corrected herself. Judges?
We're good. She
There you
wins.
go.
Judges.
Oh,
Beth wins.
Morrison
Uh,
wins.
You don't
Morrison
know how
wins. Our
sweet
judge
that
says-
is. The number of times I've lost to Boyd over the years as a sibling.
This is retribution for all those times.
Our judge just said Morrison wins.
Revenge.
Morrison, we don't know
The
which
Morrison
one.
family wins.
Dr. Morrison.
Dr. Morrison.
Son.
Even more
His
confusing.
sons.
Morrison.
Fantastic. You guys win. That was awesome.
Hey, congratulations, you two. You guys, this was a fantastic read. Anybody that loves this period is going to fall in love with this. This is a lot of fun,
I loved it.
a little educational for people who like history. But both of you really collaborated beautifully on this. You can't tell that this was a collaboration. It looks like, a continual story throughout. So congratulations on making this a real hit. We can't wait to see how the rest of the public finds this book for you. And then apparently there's a number 2 in the works.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're excited about that too.
All
Yeah,
right.
this is thriller through and through.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it.
So
Great to hear.
congratulations to you both. Thanks for coming on the episode. Loved it. And can't wait to see how this does and see you maybe for the next one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yes.
Congrats.
Our
Buy
Cheers
the
to you.
Lawless Land. Order it now.
Yes. Boys,
Yes.
Yes, sir.
The Lawless Land by Boyd and Beth Morrison.
Awesome.
Ooh, this was fun piece. Talking about knights and damsels in distress. Anybody who likes historical fiction is going to love this book. And we found out there is a number 2 coming out.
We did.
So, fantastic interview. Beth is a complete natural at this. Don't tell me she's a first-time fictional author.
Nope.
And let's raise a toast to this fantastic duo and to this fantastic trio. And welcome back.
Thank you.
Mhm. Mm. Big out. 1, 2, 3. Go.
See ya.
Christ. Are you smoking crack?
There you go.
Oh my God.
I win.
You're going to hell.
I win.
You're just going to hell. That's all there is to
I
it.
You know
win.
what Nancy would be doing if she were alive today?
I don't get it.
Kicking the lid.
Ronnie.
All right. Hey, whatever.
I'd be
it
fired.
is, That
I'd be
was,
fired.
yeah. Yeah. But it'd be a hell of a way to go out.
Hell yeah.
All right. Here we go.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Well, now I can't think.
I'm wearing chainmail next episode.
Crotchless chainmail.
Wait a minute. It covers your crotch?
Crotchless.
Oh. I mean, that's the way you go, right? What do they call that though?
Codpiece.
Not going Dutch.
What was a commando? I guess you'd be going
You're not
Night.
commando. What are you going? You're going night?
night.
Go nighty night?
I'm going
Night.
night. Fantastic period historical piece. If you like chainmail, swords, and damsels in distress, this could be your book.
I love it. Swords. You got me at swords. I was like, that's pretty good. Chainmail.
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 Sword.
Sword.
Shades of
Sword fighting. Oh, now we're talking about a whole different
What?
genre.
tummy sticks.
three-way sword fight. Here we go.
This is G-rated.
Okay.
Where's Nancy Reagan? Where's Nancy?
Let's rewind. Chris, I blame you. Mike was in the groove until you.
Oh my gosh. We had the adult handle on this show until you.
No, and I come back.
All right.
You got to bring some stupid to the show.
All right. Well, you're the man. Here we go.
I know.
3, 2, and meow.